Hello and welcome to Rough Cut Film Review. Very quickly, I've done the Bond, the Bond special. Hopefully you enjoyed it and found something interesting in there. The next big one I'll be doing is probably going to be the Harry Potter films. I've seen most of them, some of them I like, some of them I don't like, but it's going to be quite interesting to analyse them, so that's on the way. However, for now, this is actually going to be a review of the David Cronenberg film Cosmopolis, which is just about to be released, or just has been released on DVD and Blu-ray. So this film is starring Robert Pattinson. I keep saying Pattinson, but it's Pattinson. Wait, which one is it? Pattinson. Yes. And conceptually, it's a very difficult film to do. So, who is David Cronenberg and why do I like him so much? He is a Canadian film director who was very much a leading light in the body horror genre of films, which he was very much, he very much created himself. So when I say that, I'm talking about films like Slither. They were generally very clever but very nasty films with lots of bad stuff happening to bodies and, on a very low budget, actually doing some really interesting things. For example, there's that very famous scene in Scanners where the chap's head explodes, and the way they rigged that up actually was a shotgun and a watermelon. That's the way they did it, but it looks fantastic. Cosmopolis is actually David Cronenberg's attempt to, instead of dealing with the body, he moves up both physically and metaphorically to the brain. Cosmopolis is a very cerebral film, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So Cronenberg's films in general have dealt with the body, sex and death. They're pretty much the main themes he's done. Some have aged better than others, but among his really top tier films, we've got Scanners, Videodrome, The Fly with Jeff Goldblum, and Shivers. Scanners, funnily enough, I saw last year, hasn't actually aged as well as I thought it would, but I saw Videodrome a couple of months ago and thought it was absolutely fantastic. Shivers and The Fly, again, I'd highly recommend them. If you've not seen anything by David Cronenberg, if you get a chance to see Videodrome, The Fly and Scanners, and Shivers, you're setting yourself up for a treat there. So what has he done? Most recently, I think of his films as being A History of Violence and Eastern Promises. They're both sort of violent crime capers, really, which had a twist in them. And they were pretty good. I mean, particularly History of Violence, it was a very good film. And Eastern Promises wasn't perfect, but it was a perfectly serviceable, if nothing more, London Russian gangster thriller. So Cosmopolis, it has an incredibly simple setup. We see Robert Pattinson as the protagonist. He's a clearly very affluent and successful young man. He asks his limo driver at the beginning to take him for a haircut. They're in New York City. We hear the president's in town very early on, and as such, the traffic is an absolute nightmare. Stuff's been closed down. There's a credible threat that the president, there might be an assassination attempt on the president. So all we get in that regard is the traffic's going to be bad. Patterson's character gets into his limo and heads across town to go and get a haircut. It is brought to his attention that he could get a barber to come to him, but he's adamant that he wants to go to this one particular place and get a haircut. So a lot of the film is set in the limo itself. Early on he fancies breakfast, so he goes and has breakfast and has a conversation with his wife. He then goes and has his lunch. So there's an element of human interaction there, and throughout he speaks to people who tend to hop into his limousine and have a chat with him. So the film, what's it about? Well, it's about sort of wealth, the accrual of stuff. There's lots of things about rats and nature in there, or this idea of a natural state and returning to a more natural state. There were parallels with Margin Call, which I saw recently, in that it's dealing with some of the very similar issues to Margin Call, which again I very much recommend if you've not seen it. There's this concept that Cronenberg introduces of violence and destruction actually being a positive force, which was very interesting. It was this idea that destruction as a creative force. As I said, most of the time it's set in the limo, and for all intensive purposes, it's very, very different from what Cronenberg's done in the past. This is in essence a sci-fi film. The limo looks incredibly futuristic on the inside, and it is essentially a capsule with Patterson in it, and he is essentially passing through, the sort of huddle of masses of New York City, seemingly all important, but he's behind that pane of glass in the limousine, immaculately dressed in a suit, but he is behind that, separated from the people. And he is the character of Patterson's character himself is clearly a sort of profound genius with everything that he says. He makes other very clever people he surrounds himself with feel inadequate and rather silly. The conversations with which he has demonstrates his sort of brilliance, but it rubs uncomfortably alongside his other personal characteristics. So this is absolutely a sci-fi film. The title is very much a sci-fi title. The fact he's in a car, it could very much, a limousine, could very much be a spaceship, and you can see Cronenberg knows precisely what he's doing and what he's trying to achieve there. So what more to say about it? Well, I like Cronenberg an awful lot, and I do like this film, and it's remarkable at his age that Cronenberg is actually doing new things and trying something new, and this really is a big departure from some of the things he's done previously. We've seen in his previous films that he is a fantastically clever individual. So if you see Videodrome or Naked Lunch, for example, they're very, very clever films. It's very obvious. All that stuff about Long Live the New Flesh from Videodrome, really clever stuff. I also think that Patterson is very good in the role, or Pattinson, whatever he's called, I don't know, someone will know. I actually find it surprisingly difficult to recommend this film because I don't know who I'd recommend it to. I enjoyed it, and Cronenberg certainly hasn't sold out making this film at all. He has absolutely stayed true to his craft and to his, to his intellect and to what he's trying to achieve with this film. Now that's sort of a double-edged sword, really, because he can stay true to the vision he had, and he achieves what he's going for fantastically without giving too much away. And the plot changes and twists, and obviously there's a pretty big ending there, which I'm going to not give away in the slightest. But perhaps he should have given something a little bit more populist, because selling this to the multiplex masses is going to be tricky stuff. Because there won't be anything that I've said up until this point that sounds in any way tempting to someone that just wants to watch a film and be entertained, because you're not necessarily going to get that with this film. It's going to make you think, it's going to potentially interest you, although I think a lot of people will just switch off and won't pay any attention and think it's very boring, which it's not. I'll tell you what's it's a bit like, in a funny sort of way, it's a bit like if you've seen Michael Haneke's German language film Funny Games, the original. I know there was an American remake, I've not bothered seeing that. The film itself has got a singular vision to it. It's very clever, and I liked it, but I find it difficult to recommend. I mean, that film, someone is shouting at you, you're here for violence, you're here to be entertained, you find this fun, come on then, do you find this fun? So they break the third wall in that, so it's a bit different, but it's just the same in that I like both films very much, but I find them very difficult to recommend. So Cosmopolis, it's a very good film. It's very well made. It looks great. It looks absolutely fantastic. It's slow going. It's complicated, and it deals with very big issues. If you like the sound of that, you'll really enjoy it. If you are put off, if you can give the film a chance, if you're in any way interested, I would very much recommend it, because I think it's a fantastic piece of work, and it's fascinating that David Cronenberg has gone and made this film after everything he's made. But I appreciate that this is not for everyone, and I do find it difficult to wholeheartedly recommend to any normal person that isn't as pretentious as I am. So, so absolutely. So I like it very much. I'd be interested to see if you like it as well. Thanks ever so much.